Welcome to the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Today, my guest is Brigitte Gemme. Brigitte is passionate about helping more people eat more plants, empowering others to take charge of their health and live in alignment with their values. On her website, veganfamilykitchen.com, she teaches regular workshops about all aspects of healthy vegan cooking, from mindset to meal planning, from nutrition boosters to batch cooking. Along the way, Brigitte has completed a BA in Science, Technology, and Society, an MA in Sociology, and a PhD in Educational Studies. She is also the author of Flow in the Kitchen, Practices for Healthy, Stress-Free Vegan Cooking. Stick around. I want to introduce her to you. Hi, Brigitte. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's great to meet you.
Oh, it is very nice to meet you as well, and especially because I want to talk about your website and what you do. But first, can you just share with us your journey into veganism?
Yeah, of course. I have to admit, I'm probably one of these people that made bad jokes to people who were vegan. Actually, I knew only one person who I think was vegan until I guess my 30s. I come from a rural background. Before I was born, my dad had cows. After that, we had pigs. So I was never on the farm with the cows at the same time. But very much a rural family where animals were there to work for us. Certainly not to just cohabit with us, but they were clearly food and working creatures. Even the dogs were working dogs. They were not, and cats were there to catch the mice. That was their job. And I loved blue cheese. I loved steak, preferably rare. I like those two things on top of each other. But I was also somebody with, I would say, an environmental conscience. I was raised in the good days of, when recycling became a thing. I was very much into walking. When I moved away from my parents' house, I was living in the city to go to university. I was walking to school all the time. I was against having a car as much as possible. And I became very much into cycling. And at some point in one of the cycling conversations, somebody told me, if you're going to fuel your bike rides with steak, you might as well be driving a Hummer. And that destroyed me. I was so shocked. And, of course, I don't know what I said on the moment, but then I looked into it, and the comparison is not exactly right, but it's still in the right ballpark. And I was like, goodness gracious, I have never, ever thought, and that was in my early 30s, I had never given a single thought about the environmental footprint of my food. And from that moment, I started doing a lot more research into the issue. And I came to the conclusion that, I love these things, but I definitely should not be cooking them at home. I should have maybe meat and cheese outside as a treat. If I'm going at someone's house, maybe I'll eat it, but I'm going to cook plant-based at home. And that lasted a couple of years. I had a young child at the time. She was about 2 years old, and that was okay. It went okay. And then I had my second child. And in the meantime, I had been reading, of course, a lot of stuff written by vegans, I guess, as you do when you start eating that way. And I had been thinking more about animal rights. And it's in the middle of the night, and I'm breastfeeding my newborn. He's got to be like a month or something. And I'm just emerging from the haze of childbirth and the craziness of the first few weeks and not sleeping. And I realize, what if someone came and took my newborn, did who knows what with him to get my milk? I cannot continue being a part of this. And it's not like I never knew before how milk happened and how eggs happened, especially milk. I think I had a pretty good knowledge of milk, but I had never thought about it from the perspective of the cow. And having the ethical and environmental considerations that I now had. And also now I knew that I could very well eat that way and meet all of my nutritional needs. After cooking like this for 2 years, I knew, my diet was 95% vegan. So I knew I was fine. It's like, oh, well, I guess I got to let that go definitively. And that's when I became fully vegan. And that was in 2015.
Wow. Two things that you mentioned that people don't realize. One, about there are environmentalists out there and they have such a hard time making the connection. Like you said, eating the way you do and driving your bicycle is like driving a Hummer. I think that that kind of makes it really clear. And the other one about, holding your baby in your arms and breastfeeding him. And then all of a sudden realizing, wow, kind of made that connection right there. If somebody took my baby so that they could have my milk, how horrible that would be. So, wow. Wow.
And I mean, it's better to ride your bike and eat meat, I suppose, than drive a Hummer and eat meat. But if you're doing those things for environmental reasons, I think that's why I was prepared, I guess, to some point to be challenged on the facts. And I could have been defensive, and I'm pretty sure I was on the spur of the moment. So I apologize to the internet stranger for whatever my response was at the time. But I think there's just a lot of us that have never given a whole lot of thought to the environmental footprint of our food. And once we get into that, and just the same thing as for health, I think for some other people, health will be the front door into eating more plants. And then you realize, well, you know what? I can very well live without animal products. It's totally possible for me. I'm not saying it's possible for everyone on Earth, but it is definitely possible for the vast majority of us living in the global north and the west kind of thing. And once we practice it as an experiment kind of thing, you're like, oh, well, you know what? This is something I can do. And then I think we feel less triggered, or we feel less like our back is against the wall with the animal rights issue. Because for as long as we keep on believing that we need those foods, it's where it's really hard to embrace the other parts of the nutritional truth, I guess.
Right. Myself, I went vegan for the animals. Just hadn't made the connection, and all of a sudden it did. And it was like I was so guilty, so mad, so many feelings that came through me because I was so upset that I had not taken the moment, like you said before, to actually think about what was happening.
You can't be too hard on yourself, because it's not an actual conspiracy, but it's just the same. As a society, we've done everything to put food away, food preparation, and even we've put agriculture, and especially animal agriculture, as far as we can. And I was listening to a podcast recently about school gardens, right? And notice they don't have school slaughterhouses, and that's, I think most teachers would think that's a really, really bad idea. And we've moved all of that aspect of animal use far away from our sight. We don't see it. We don't think about it. People just take it for granted. And so when you lift the veil and don't look at that for the first time, it's very shocking. But it's not like you were actively trying to ignore it your whole life. Right. I think there's just the way we've built our societies now is to put those things away. And I think we're also working hard currently at putting cooking away. And that's my battle today, because as much as we've put growing the food out of sight and out of mind, I think for a lot of people, they also wish that we could put cooking out of sight and out of mind and just eat. In Canada, the big companies that deliver food, like Uber Food. One of them is called Just Eat, and the other one is called Skip the Dishes. And basically, in the same way as we've put growing the food away, we're trying to put away even the preparation of the food, to farm it all out. And I think that's not a great idea.
Right. Well, now that we're talking about food, let's talk about your website, Vegan Family Kitchen, and what you actually do there.
Well, for the most part, I decide what's for dinner for people. And I do this to apologize to my mother for all the times when I was growing up where she said, "What do you guys want for dinner?" And we would all scamper away because we didn't want to decide, and she had to figure it out for herself. I think there's a lot of decision fatigue that plays for a lot of people that are involved in making dinner. And it's like, the worst part of cooking is not cooking. It's not even cleaning. For a lot of people, it's like, what am I going to do? And especially if you're just starting to go plant-based and you feel maybe a little bit insecure about nutrition and making balanced meals. And so you can spend all day, and I sure did at the beginning because I cared a whole lot. And I had, these young children. I wanted to make sure that I was feeding everybody right. My husband and I were quite athletic, still are. So we wanted to get enough food, enough calories, enough nutrients, enough protein, enough everything, iron, calcium. And so I spent all day pretty much, when I was not at home cooking, I was spending time thinking, okay, what is it going to be? And is this going to meet our needs? And so the first thing I did when I decided to transition away from the work I was doing in the university at the time, I was a research manager, but I decided not to do that. I wanted to have a more hands-on place to support people who wanted to transition to eating plant-based. And I was like, well, I'm doing this for myself, so I might as well do it for others, which is deciding what's for dinner. And so I have a meal planning service that people can subscribe to. And out of that came, as I have also more time, my kids are a little bigger now, they're 8 and 7 and 11. And so I can spend more time having monthly cooking workshops, which is really great. We address issues around building skills. So it's not so much about teaching a specific recipe, but more about teaching the skills you need to cook. And it can go from meal planning to meal prep to actual cooking certain things, but like learning how to make soup. You don't need a recipe to make soup. And that's a big news for some people. So we do that. And we have a cooking club also that's really fun. And we meet every other week on Zoom to cook together. And that's the best part of my job. I love it.
That is awesome. That is so important because, like you said, sometimes people just don't know, what should they have in their pantry and what can they do. And as you said, I'm with you on the fact that it's really not about the recipe for the soup, but knowing everything that's available and then kind of making it your own work of art. You get in the kitchen. That's what I try to do. I'm like a painter, and my spices and my pots and my pans and my plants are my, canvas and paints and everything, and just love to have this colorful, flavorful celebration of life-giving sustenance.
I love this. But I got to say, sometimes it's not going to be a pretty painting. A lot of cooking on weeknights, especially for me, will be about wanting to avoid waste and using what I have and combining ingredients sometimes that some people may not have thought about, and experimenting even, going a little wild sometimes, and you put things in and you observe what happens. And like a scientist, you make some notes after, and next time you've learned something. And so I think there's, on the one hand, yes, the creative aspect of it, but also doing with what you've got and discovering new flavors that maybe you would have not created if you had an infinite pantry, but who's got that, so learning to use what we have, learning to use what's in season, and adjusting, substituting, making things work for the needs of our families, because a lot of people have special eating needs as well. And so we can always adapt to that. But once you understand the principles, then you don't need an individual recipe anymore. And as you say, as you grow your experience, then you can become more creative and make it a work of art if you want on a Saturday night. But if you're, really busy on a Wednesday night, then you can just hack something together. And you know what? It might be pretty good and it will meet your nutritional needs.
Yes, and use your kitchen as a laboratory, like you said before. I mean, experiment and try things. Sometimes I have leftovers and I come home and I'm tired because I'm coming home from work and I'm like, I got to eat before a certain time. And I open I open the refrigerator and I see what I have there. I'm gonna have a leftover of this, a leftover of that, and then I make a whole new dish.
Yeah, bits and bobs, my favorite.
So things like that. Now I'm going to have your information on our website, our Facebook page, because you have resources, free resources also on your page, and a lot of good information.
Thank you. Yeah, I encourage people to download the 5-day meal plan. It's a dinner plan with recipes that you can prepare some bits on the weekend, for example, or whenever you have time to cook in the week. And then you can have much less stressful weeknights, but still enjoy whole foods, plant-based meals every day of the week.
And would you say one more question? And would you say, because for me, after I went vegan, I love food. Before that, I was I have to eat it because I got to survive. But because I'm discovered so many new things, I love vegan food.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of people think of a vegan diet as restrictive, but actually it's the opposite. I have never eaten so many different foods, which by the way is also really good for our gut microbiome health. And there's so many vegetables that I never ate before, different kinds of grains, different kinds of legumes and spices, herbs, and you can bring it all together on a everyday basis. But I like to make some choices every week. So every week I don't eat all the things. But over the course of a year, I have completely gone around the cycle of all the different foods that are available to us. And there's immense joy in that. And just having, I think, the spiritual weight lifted off our shoulders of knowing that there's so much less suffering involved in our food. It's not like there's no suffering, but having the sense that we're contributing far less to basically misery in the world can be very much uplifting and make you feel better. And it nourishes you, makes you feel good about your health, about your body, gives you energy, and then you can show up for others and for yourself in the world and live your best life.
Absolutely. Now, to my viewers, if you want to put a gem in your toolkit box for learning more about your journey into veganism, then I say go to Family Vegan Kitchen, sorry.
Vegan Family Kitchen. Oh, you
Oh,
had it
I said
right.
it right. Okay, Vegan Family Kitchen.
.com, yes.
And check out Brigitte, Gemme. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Thank you for joining us on another Vegan Pulse. Remember, check out our website, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Live vegan.